Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining and for viewing. My name is Goteh from Deem Journal. I am honored to be in a conversation with Tanya Aguiñiga.
Yep, Aguiñiga, very close.
Thank you. Thank you. Tanya is a Los Angeles-based artist, designer, and craft person who was raised in Tijuana, Mexico, holding an MFA in furniture design from RISD, as well as a BA from San Diego State University. And so her work is informed through collaboration, but also really how she works between activism, community-based art, as well as a couple other practices that I'm very interested in talking about in a second. But really, a question that I have based off of your bio that I just read.
Yes.
Is what is the difference, or how do you differentiate yourself as a designer, an artist, and a craftsperson, as well as an activist? And how do those elements come together, or do they hold different spaces?
They mostly, honestly, always live together, but I have to kind of, I feel a lot of times leave them like super like out there so that people that need labels can have something to hold on to. Because, you know, in so many instances, the labels are more about the person trying to categorize you rather than like what you feel yourself as. And so because, you know, the design world and the craft world and the art world don't really speak very well together, and they're starting to more speak better like together now. But for so many years, because I've been doing this for like 20 something years, like we didn't have shared like spaces or language. And so then all of the different like designations, I guess, existed to like accommodate more old school people that need those divisions.
Yeah. And so even I wonder, when you started and you were dabbling in many different areas, I guess, what were some of your inspirations that actually allowed you to see that you can operate across these different spectrums?
In the beginning, honestly, I like kept my like social practice work, which, I mean, the term didn't exist when I started working in like social practice. It was in like 96, 97. So it was just like migrant rights work, humanitarian work. It was just, you know, like work that had to be done. It was so intense and so hardcore, a lot of the stuff that I was working with. Dealing with like building a community center in a community that was a land squat made out of trash from the U.S. that was run by women who were indigenous and had ties to the Zapatista movement, and was a land squat, so it was autonomous from the government. So it was this really crazy kind of like divergence of a lot of different really radical ideas and ideologies. That a lot of the work that I was doing was so heavy emotionally that I needed to find a place to like get super OCD and like be assured that the world can be controlled. And so then that's where I put my like energy and furniture, you know? So I was like, I can hold a square to it, you know, and nothing was like messy or emotional. And then when I moved from the border region to study for grad school in Rhode Island, that's where all of a sudden everything kind of just blended and started getting really messy, because I didn't have those outlets. I didn't have community anymore. I didn't have like places to keep things separate. It was just all felt so like raw and like so much longing for community and for like having any Mexicans around, which there's not a lot of Mexicans in New England. And so so in the beginning, I also started making and like studying and working on stuff before I had access to the internet, and before I had computers, and before there was cell phones. So a bunch of the stuff, honestly, I was exposed to through my mentor, who at the time was one of the founders of the Border Art Workshop, which had started in the 80s. And so I was brought up into like the art world through, community college professor that would just share like books with me and things.
Amazing, amazing. I have a deceptively simple question that really starts to really starting to understand you as a designer born and raised in Tijuana, coming to the United States. How would your parents, back to titles, how do your parents describe the work that you do?
I think they probably tell people that I'm a furniture designer still, which I haven't made furniture probably in like 12 years. And probably that's it. That's probably all they say. But same thing, like when I was studying in Providence, they would just tell people that I lived in New York. So, there's like very simple, like general, like, yeah, that sounds all right to tell like, like folks that are not in the art world, that don't even live in this country. But yeah, I think that they simplified things to, something that sounds, I guess, better to like, people that aren't like schooled in art stuff or even like higher ed,
Mm-hmm. One of the things I noticed about your work as well, or certain aspects of your work, is that it is very communal. And you do engage communities of people that may not be schooled or have all the framework and methodologies and terminologies. Like, I guess, how do you find ways of being able to engage with various types of communities?
Honestly, like a lot of the stuff from the beginning stems from a place of wanting to connect with my own family, with my own community, with people that have similar experiences, from my childhood or whatever. And so for a lot of the stuff, I usually come up with an idea, and then it's usually like not like a project or a thing. It's usually just like a goal, like something that I want to like work towards, no? And then I start designing, I guess, systems for like, how can I get to that? How can I get to that goal through like small term, longer term, like small, medium, and large engagement, like avenues of entry for people. And then I start thinking about all of the logistics of like, how can I then edit and tailor like these like actual functional things so that I have the highest degree of success, like engineered into it. So that at the end, whoever participates doesn't feel bad about themselves. And so it's all kind of thinking about how to like dismantle like perception systems of power, like hierarchies, things that prevent us from seeing ourselves in those positions of power, things that make us feel like we don't have the right to be in those spaces, or, with one of the projects, asking somebody like to make a knot, and people are like, I don't know how to make a knot. And then I'm like, dude, your shoelace is tied. You made a knot this morning, But it's like, I guess kind of a lot of it is about demystifying what art is and what art can be. And, even that like making food is totally art, and, just having people, I guess, have greater access to places of feeling like empowered and understood and like held and, and heard. Yeah.
And that's why I found it very inspiring and empowering that in your series of titles that may not be useful for you, but are useful for other people to grab onto, that seeing craftsperson in there and seeing that being alongside artist and designer, and knowing that there is an intentionality around that, because it's not often that, like there is a class system that design shows up here, craft shows up over here, and these people make crafts, and these people make design, and especially congratulations as a designer, artist, and craftsperson for the awesome award you just won, the Heinz Award. I was just on your Instagram, and I said, "Whoa, look at that!" I guess.
I know.
How do you feel? How do you feel?
Today's been really crazy. It feels really insane, and it feels really overwhelming, and honestly just like just so life-changing, and but so grateful that I have to like write this big speech. I've been working on it today, but also, you know, just looking at the people that have won before, and looking at how like craft isn't something that's ever considered like at the same level as like high art or like high culture things, you know, like ballet and, you know, music composition and all these other things. So it's really incredible. And also to think that, you know, a lot of times people or institutions shy away from engaging with my work because it's political. And, you know, it reminds us that everything's not okay in the US. And I know that we constantly have lots of reminders, like all the time, you know, in like our BIPOC communities. But, you know, institutions with like their boards and all this other stuff, yeah, sometimes get kind of scared to mess with the border because it's a place that's constantly, you know, just like just in flux and in just in the middle of so much pain. Yeah.
One of the quotes I pulled from you that really inspires me is about the border: creating space in our physical border for mourning, praying, acknowledgement of our shared humanity in a space that seeks to separate and destroy us. What can we learn, especially as a society? I mean, if we're thinking about the United States, if you're thinking about the broader globe, especially the time that you spent in this transformative space, right? Thinking about the border as this transformative space that's meant to divide, but also you finding opportunities to actually say, no, this space adds value. What are some of the things that as a society we can learn from your work at the border?
I think honestly, one of the main things that I constantly, I think, like work towards is to help people understand that the border, I mean, the borders are everywhere, right? Like the borders, like we're constantly creating borders, like, you know, redlining, like all these different things, like borders and border issues aren't just things that happen at the U.S. Mexico, like frontier. They're not something that happens, you know, like a lot of the problematics don't just happen and stay isolated in those places. There are things that are around us all the time, things that we can engage with all the time. But then also for a lot of us, the actual physical US Mexico border is not that far. And like not too far from here, like you and I are in LA, like 2 hours away from here, which a lot of people have never driven to the US Mexico border, have never seen it, have never engaged with it, have never taken the time to even, you know, drive down and see like, what does it look like? Does it exist? Like, what does it, like, what feelings does it give me to be in front of it? Like, how do I feel about my like tax money paying for this thing? You know, like most people don't ever feel, I guess that it's that accessible to them, and that crossing the border is that accessible, or that getting involved and helping anybody, like, especially like your neighbor, is that easy. And so with tons of different things, I think also try to kind of demystify what does it mean to like get involved with mutual aid? Like how easy is it to actually like organize within your community, organize within your friends, and do things that are, you know, giving back more than we're constantly taking from things, you know? And how can we exist and create systems that are more communal, that are like less based on capitalism, and that just make space for just more humane ways of being, you know?
Yeah, everything you said really resonates with me, because my family's from Liberia. We came as refugees in the 90s to fleeing a civil war. And so especially during the Trump presidency, there was so much propaganda that just like made the border, made Mexicans seem so abstract, and these like aliens are invading and not like coming from another planet. And so my mom lives in New England. So you were right, there's not that many Mexicans in New England. So, so my mom came to visit, and I told her, I was like, hey, bring your passport. And she's like, bring my passport. Why? Are we going somewhere? And I was like, oh, don't worry about it. And we drove down to the border, and we drove to Tijuana. And I think we went to a little bit south of Tijuana. I think it starts with an E, but yeah. And so she was like, whoa, I didn't know the border was this close. Like, wait a minute. And then we're driving through, and she's seeing things that remind her of Liberia. And she's like, oh, wait a minute. And then I'm like, yeah, like these are humans. Like this isn't like you may hear about it in the media. And then I remember after that trip, two things. One, she's like, oh, I love Mexico. When are we going back? When are we going back? Like, we should just stay here. Then another thing she learned was not to bring flowers back, because then we got stuck. Then we got pulled over, and we were at the border for a long time. But I think to your point, like there is, and especially what inspires me about your work is that there is this level of actually being able to put humans back into this. I think that's an equation that's left out, and that's a notion that's left out. And the beauty of being able to work across many different types of practices, a social practice, a craft practice, an art practice, is that things start to bleed together. And design tends to, like you said, design focuses on these things, art focuses on these things, and then you have like activists that focus on these things. But I feel like the beauty is, and especially what I see in your work, is the ability to take and reframe the context, art's ability to reframe the context of something like a physical wall, a metal wall that's meant to divide people, and actually in being able to reframe and obscure that then we can start to pour in what are our actual values into this. And hopefully at a certain point that will manifest into a systemic change that can start to move us away from needing borders.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one like a really crazy difference between like living with borders in the US and living with borders in Mexico, is that in the US there's constant space in a lot of places between like the population and the border. So people don't have to be confronted with the reality, of, oh, you're living at a border place. And that's where the cities that live along the border on the US side that don't live with borders, they tend to be more like conservative, Republican places, that have more harsh policies against immigrants. And then the places that live with them have more of an understanding of the porosity and like the humanness of migrating, and our need to constantly have flow between like all of our countries. And in Mexico, for the most part, almost every single place lives right up to the fence, and sometimes the fence is like the back fence of like or like the back wall of your house, and so it's different because I think here in the US a lot of things constantly get like conveniently removed, like dead dogs, like you don't have to hear like live with the smell of decay, like there's all of this crazy stuff that I think psychologically just carves out a very different way of being than you have in other places.
Yeah. So once again, congratulations on the award. What's coming up? What are you excited about? What's keeping you up at night besides writing this speech?
Oh my God. So a really big project that we have that's gonna be in December is I'd been working this year. I founded and started a ceramic studio at an LGBTQ 12-step asylum shelter in Tijuana. So it's all folks that are asylum seekers. They're all LGBTQ and they're all in recovery. So we started the ceramics program, and at first it was just out of seeing like the need for more like places for people to just, you know, kind of find escapes from reality. And then started to see more the value of like clay as therapy, and then started partnering with, then we started having therapists as part of the program as well. And so anyways, we were working on creating these memorial incense burners, which is I think the piece that you're talking about from Instagram. And so it's been, since the pandemic happened, it's been a lot slower being able to do projects at the border, because sometimes the timing is just not right. And there's more things like actual survival that need to get taken care of, or where energies have to be focused rather than like design or art, you know? And so anyways, I'm going on the road in December to install the incense burners along the entirety of the U.S. Mexico border. But it's gonna be pretty insane, and the timing of like getting the award is pretty amazing, because I'll be like seeing and surveying and like thinking about what more ways can we use art, design, and craft to help change narratives at the border, to actually start creating systems to defend people, and start doing larger initiatives that people can participate in, to address a lot of issues that that local governments don't take up, you know, like being able to have a place where people can take a shower, or even like have like light in encampments. There's all this just crazy chaos of yeah, all this craziness that that the US government doesn't pick up, you know, that the Mexican government doesn't pick up the work for that. And so yeah, so I'm just excited to see, excited and kind of scared of how insane conditions and painful conditions are going to be, but also excited, I guess, for the possibility of trying to kind of tackle some of those problems using craft and design.
Yeah, everything you said, there's a couple of through lines, especially with the topics that we're excited about at Deem Journal. Our first issue one, was designing for dignity, right? Like, what is a dignified life? Who gets to say what a dignified life is? And one of the things that we've been thinking about is, how does that start to intersect with the idea of placemaking, turning a space into a place? And one of the questions that we're asking ourselves is, okay, well then, what does placemaking start to look like for liminal housing, especially for migrants that are moving from one place to another and left the home and haven't really arrived to another home? Like, where does dignity start to play into that, and how do you start to design and invest into that? And so it sounds like your project is like very, very exciting, very daunting.
Very daunting, and like yeah, and I mean, and I pretty much roll with like an all femme crew, so it's always like also added layers, like as like mothers, as people that themselves have been like vulnerable, as like undocumented folks, as like, you know, people like queer folks stepping into these spaces that hold so much violence and so much danger for us. Yeah, it's also just yeah, just these different layers that we should all be thinking about, you know. But I hope we can like get together, since you're in LA,
Yeah,
and then we can talk, and maybe we can work together on stuff.
Yeah, where are you in LA?
So I live in East LA, but the studio is in Elysian Valley, so Frogtown.
Nice, nice. So I am in South Central. I live in South Central, but my office is in the Arts District, and we're actually opening up a pop-up reference room, reference library that's going to be in Chinatown from December. Yeah, I'll invite you to the opening. Or just to come, because it's not meant to be like a big opening, because we're still, you know, COVID. So, I have one more question.
Yes.
My question is, especially now we're like still on the theme of liminal spaces and transition, COVID, right? It came, disrupted. It was like that house guest was like, hey, that friend was like, I'm up the street, are you home? And you're like, yeah. And then they come and they're like there. So COVID invited itself over. It's here. It pretty much disrupted all the systems that we thought were valuable. People started realizing, oh, wait a minute, it's not as valuable. And people adapted. But especially now as we start to move into this weird, like kind of quasi post-COVID, because people were like, well, we're just going to live with it. My question for you are, what are some of the things that you took away from COVID that actually you felt benefited you and served you, whether it's in your process, your practice, or just in your life that you want to hold on to?
And I have to say, because and I'm sure maybe it's similar like in your neighborhood, but in my neighborhood, like the line to get food, we just passed it this morning, is longer than it's ever been for people that, don't have food security. My neighborhood also has an insane amount of funerary homes, and there's still almost every single day, there's still a funeral. And so I don't think at all we're like in like past COVID, we're not post COVID, like I think the people that have the privilege to be in places that weren't as affected, cool, but like we're not past it, and like people should not forget that it's like still affecting a lot of people. And also, like other countries don't have the vaccine. It's the situation is real everywhere else. But one thing that was a really amazing lesson that I learned was, I was constantly traveling before COVID to do lectures, to do workshops, all this other stuff. And I'd never spent that much time in LA or at home. And I'm so grateful to have had like quiet moments, even though like they were really stressful. And like, like we all thought the fucking world was ending, and like we didn't know if we were going to be able to hug anybody ever again. I'm really grateful to have been like given just some pause and stuff. And that even though a lot of stuff feels like it was like shaken and like crumbled to the core, I'm really grateful for like being able to have space now to decide how I want to rebuild, and decide like what I want to keep, what serves me, what no longer serves me, what are things that were actually causing more harm than good, like relationship wise, job wise, like everything, and so I think I'm really glad for having a little bit of like breathing room. And yeah, just grateful that, I made it through so far, and that that the majority of my family has also.
Awesome. I found, I know we're probably over now, but I found this weird thing happened with me where I was like, oh, I'm home. I have so much more time and space. And then capitalism came in and says, no, you don't. No, you don't. And then just adapted. And so I think part of it for me was like, oh, being home means I can do more. And then me realizing like, no, actually, it doesn't mean I should do more. It actually means I should sit still and not try to adapt everything to reach this level of efficiency or output or this goal. Like sometimes it's in the stillness. Stillness may just be it. And I think that's one of the things that I am continuing to work through and take away from our current COVID situation.
Yeah, no, and another thing I know like we're over time and whatever. Like as much as I hate Zoom, like as much as I hate it, it's also pretty amazing to have been able to like have meetings with people like in different parts of the world, and like to feel like we can also create community online, and we can use this tool for good, not just for like, like.
Yeah. I had an awesome conversation with my mom using Zoom. She used to hate Zoom as well. She still kind of does. But then I started showing her that you can upload virtual backgrounds. And you could do videos. Let me see. Is it this one? Yeah, this one. So this is so this is taken in a pedicab in Liberia going into the city central in Monrovia. And so like I'm talking to her and I was like, watch this. And she's like, oh my God, I know that bridge. And it just like got her so excited. And it's just like little things like that that you're able to do via Zoom, and which, kind of hard to translate in real person. But I don't know, I try to find ways to at least be able to use the technology to make sense for me. So
yeah, no, totally. So yeah, I'm glad that I like hated it so much, and I still am like, oh, it's so much better to be able to like see people, yeah, and like connect face to face. But until then, yeah, it's pretty amazing. We have this crazy ass, that makes it so that we don't have to travel as much.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I have found that I'm also, now that things are quasi opening up. So similar to you, like I also teach, so I have lectures, all these things. So some things I'll be booked in person for, and then some things would be Zoom. And then I'll look at my calendar and I'll be like, oh, I have to go there. Like I need like 30 to 45 minutes to get there. And then, oh, I need to get back to sit in my comfortable Zoom seating in this weird like void that I'm sitting in. I was like, wait, should I take it from the car? And I was like, and then I'm like trying to figure it out. So yeah.
Yes. Adjusting to all the things people want from us, no?
Yeah. But I mean, I think we're both in a place that we can give, and which is a privilege and which is a benefit. And I always love to be able to just use the opportunities that I have to be able to create affirming communities, create opportunities for people to be their best and hopefully be able to share their best with everyone else. So.
Yes, I too am of that same school. So I hope we can, one day we can be together and do something together.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so excited.